Well, I'm back from Mallorca now, and the last few days have been fairly steady just to allow me to adapt to the training I did during the 3 weeks I was out in Mallorca for. Hannah has also been on nights, so I haven't filmed any training related content as I didn't really think it'd be the most exciting for you guys to watch. So I thought it'd be a good idea to give you a bit of an overview of the training I did in Mallorca. Firstly, it's important to understand the aims of my training leading into the race season to give you a bit of context behind the training that I am actually doing. And that being to number one, continue to improve my swim, and number two, improve my durability by increasing my overall training volume and also performing more intervals under greater fatigue. To give an example of this, the week before going on this training camp, I went over to Ireland and raced a 5k where I ran a time of 14:45 off some very mediocre training leading into it. But if I kind of reflect on my last season racing over the 70.3 distance, none of my runs were quicker than sort of the 1:15 mark. So I think it's evident that I've got the speed to run well, but I just haven't really been able to translate my kind of running fresh to running in a fatigue state off the bike. But anyway, I hope that gives you a bit more background leading into this camp, so let's dive into some numbers. During the 3 weeks, I swam a total of 14 hours and 30 minutes, covering a distance of 47 kilometers. This was split over 5 to 6 swims a week and consisted of kind of one threshold set, one pace range set, and then the rest kind of aerobic swimming. I cycled a total of 36 hours and covered a distance of 1,102 kilometers, and this was kind of riding all but one day of the week and consisted of one key session. And then I ran a total of 15 hours, which equated to running just under 200k, 194k to be precise, and this was split over kind of 5 runs a week and consisted of 1 to 2 key sessions a week. So the middle 2 weeks being a full kind of Monday to Sunday week, I did just under 25 hours for both of those weeks, which is a bit of a step up from what I had been doing previously, but it's definitely where I'm aiming to be consistently doing week on week in going forward. I guess the promising thing was I came back from those 3 weeks not feeling totally spent and desperate for rest, but I know it's kind of necessary to make the adaptations from that training. Well, I hope that gives you a bit more of a broad overview of the training, so let's dive in a little further, shall we? The 2 main swim sets throughout the 3 weeks I was in Mallorca were both a threshold set, and before going out to Mallorca I did a couple of swim time trials to establish kind of my zones, and that consisted of doing a 250 metre and a 1k time trial, and I was really pleased with how that went, especially the 1k where I kind of averaged 1:15 pace. So based off the times I did for those 2 time trials, that gives me an estimate critical swim speed of 1:16, so that was kind of the target paces going into these threshold sets. The first threshold set I did consisted of 5 times 400 meters. Again, all my swimming out in Mallorca was done in a short course pool, and the times I hit for these 400 meters were 5:10, 5:10, 5:12, 5:15 and 5:20. So I started out at an average speed of kind of 1:17 and then dropped off to around 1:20 for the final rep, and this session was hard. The second threshold swim being 12 by 200 meters, and for this set we slightly adapted it due to the pool we used being quite warm. So to not overheat, we broke it up into 4 sets of 3 with 100 easy between. And for the first 3 sets I was kind of consistently holding around 2:35 pace, and then for the final set tailed off a bit to kind of 2:37, 2:38. So on the whole, I'm pretty pleased with how my swimming's been going, and I'm seeing some good progression and still plenty of time leading into race season to hopefully keep improving. Any aerobic swimming I did was around the 1:25 pace. For the cycling we use a 3-zone model which consists of the moderate, heavy and severe domain, and 84% of my riding was done in the moderate domain, 13.5% was done in the heavy domain, and 2.5% was ridden in the severe domain. So you can tell from this the vast majority of my riding was just about getting the volume in, and then any sessions I did were kind of more sub-threshold to threshold sessions. The first session I did was kind of the day after travelling out to Mallorca, and that consisted of 4 by 8 minutes at around critical power. I had been feeling a bit under the weather travelling out to Mallorca, and also think I was still just kind of getting over travel because the power wasn't particularly good and my heart rate was pretty low. For these reps, I had an average power of 276 for the first rep, 273 for the second, 271 for the third, and finished with an average of 267 watts for the final rep. These were done in position, and the heart rate for these reps was 152, 155, 152 and 149. If I compare this to a session I did later on in the camp, which was a bit of a progression on this set, which was 5 by 8 minutes, I averaged 296, 294, 295, 305 and 292, and my average heart rate for these were 162, 166, 166, 169, 166 beats per minute respectively. Granted, the second session was done going up a hill and out of position compared to the first being in position on the flat terrain, but I definitely felt a lot better during that session. And then the other session I did was a 2.5 hour ride with a 90-minute tempo block in the middle, and for this I averaged 233 watts and 237 normalised, and had an average heart rate of 140 beats per minute. And all my riding out in Mallorca was done on my TT bike. But let's finish off by discussing the run, and I would say about 99% of my running was done sub-threshold during the 3 weeks, and that consisted of 1 to 2 key sessions, with the rest being moderate running. And I tend to do my runs as the final session of the day. I tend to do my moderate running on the easier side of things, typically averaging around 4:45 to 5 minute kilometre pace with an average heart rate of kind of 115 to 130, depending on how much fatigue I was carrying from the training done previous that day or the previous few days training. I did 4 quality sessions during the 3 weeks, and that consisted of 2 tempo runs, 1 progression run from sort of tempo to critical pace, and then 1 kind of pace range into tempo session. One of the tempo runs was a 30-minute continuous, which I did towards the beginning of the 3 weeks, and then the other one was a 40-minute continuous, which I did as the last session of the training camp. For the 30-minute block, I had an average pace of 3:44 per kilometre and average heart rate of 156, and then for the 40-minute block, I had an average pace of 3:43 per kilometre for an average heart rate of 158. Well, that wraps up the swim, bike, run data, which I hope you found interesting. I didn't do any S&C sessions while I was there, but I did do plenty of mobility in and around the sessions itself. And then I put a post out on our community tab and on Instagram asking if you had any questions you wanted me to cover during this video, and one of them being about snacks. Everyone loves a bit of food, don't they? So the question was, did I take my own snacks out with me, or did I just buy stuff out there? And I guess kind of a combination of the both. In terms of like training fuel, I took the vast majority of that out with me, and then just kind of topped up from the supermarket, stuff like bananas and Haribo. On the moderate rides, I typically tended to have around 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrates an hour, and then on the kind of more intense sessions, more like 60 to 80, but didn't really measure it out precisely. During the 3 weeks in Mallorca, I had a grand total of 3 cafe stops while out on rides. I'm kind of not really one that tends to stop, so I only really had a cafe stop when I was riding with company. For the running, I tended to take a gel on the longer runs and the sessions, so had kind of 25 to 30 grams of carbs during those runs. And for the swimming, I just kind of sipped on electrolytes throughout the session. And then snacks I was having kind of in and around training was plenty. I was definitely eating a lot while I was out there, and I really discovered a love for dark chocolate coated rice cakes, which I ate plenty of during the 3 weeks. Another question I had was, where are the best places to swim, bike and run in Port de Plensa? And I guess that kind of depends on the time of year you're going and if you're hiring a car or not. The vast majority of the swimming I was doing was in just the public leisure centre in Port de Plensa. I'm not actually sure what it's called, but I'm pretty sure it's the only public access pool in the port. But I'll leave a link in the description below to it. And then for any harder sets, I tended to go to Alcudia just because the pool was a bit cooler, so it made it a bit more conducive to swimming hard. and meant I was less likely to overheat. I've also previously swam in an open air pool in the old town, but I'm pretty sure that's only open for a couple of months throughout the summer, so it kind of depends when you're out there. And I guess the other option is if you're going out in the kind of summer months, then you've got plenty of access to open water swimming in the sea. You're almost spoiled for choice for riding from Port de Plensa, having great access to plenty of flat routes, but then also the mountains as well. I'll link to a couple of longer routes that I've enjoyed in the past down in the description below. There's also plenty of places in Port de Plensa where you can rent a bike if you didn't want to travel with your own. Running wise, I typically tended to stay to running around the lanes, but they're generally pretty flat. But it can get windy, particularly later in the day, but that may just be due to the time of year that I was there. I believe there's also a track in the old town by the open air pool I previously mentioned, but I've never used it. I hope that gives you a good insight into the 3-week block I did out in Mallorca. And I really did enjoy it, and I'm definitely keen to implement more training camps into my kind of season in the future. If you made it this far into the video, then hopefully that means you've enjoyed it, and in which case please do hit that subscribe button and go and watch another video of ours like this vlog here that we put out while we're in Mallorca.